Welcome to the I Am One podcast, where we talk to perinatal mental health advocates, professionals, and educators supporting the mission of Postpartum Support International. We're not afraid to ask our guests about the hardest parts of pregnancy and postpartum because we know that PSI has tools and resources to help in every situation, and everyone should know about them.
Whether you are among the 1 in 5 moms, 1 in 10 dads, one of many trans or non-binary parents, or you're one professional or advocate committed to helping folks in need, you are also one of us.
I'm your host, Danny Giddens, and I am 1 in 5. I didn't know what to call what I was experiencing after becoming a parent and felt too scared at the time to speak up.
Not anymore. Now she won't stop talking about it. Hi, I'm your co-host, Emily Jankowski. I am also 1 in 5, and I want you to know that mental health complications are common, but they aren't normal.
There's something powerful in knowing I am one of many. Whether you're already connected to the perinatal mental health world, looking for new ways to support parents and families, or just want to hang out with us in your earbuds, we are so glad that you tuned in.
Of course they want to hang out with us. We're lovely. Seriously though, the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this pod are the speaker's own. Tuning into this podcast is, spoiler alert, not a replacement for therapy, but PSI can help you find a therapist. We could also help you find a psychiatrist, a support group, or Waldo.
Emily, Waldo? Come on! We don't know where Waldo is.
Okay, fine. PSI help seekers can find peer support and resources in their area.
At PSI, we want you to know you are not alone, you are not to blame, and with help, you will be well. On today's episode, we're sitting down with Nicole McNelis, speaker, writer, therapist mom, and mom therapist. For anyone who's attended PSI's 2024 annual conference in Washington, D.C., you may remember Nicole from the highly attended session that she led on rage. And if you didn't attend, I'm sure that you heard all kinds of buzz about that session afterward, because this is a topic that people are ready to talk about. We'll chat about compromised needs, violated expectations, and good enough parenting. Oh, and our plans for a little meetup to try Philly's best cheesesteak. Anyone want to join us? Make sure you stick around to the very end of the lightning round when we ask Nicole a question that brings all three of us to tears. We laugh, we cry, we say the quiet thoughts out loud. So without any further ado, please sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode with our friend Nicole. Nicole, welcome to the podcast studio. We are so excited that you are here. Highly, highly anticipated from the I Am One podcast hosts. You must know we have been fangirling since the PSI conference this summer when you led just like this little session on postpartum rage, that they had to close the doors to because so many people wanted to come attend it.
And then you became famous overnight as a result. Can I have your autograph?
More on that later, but we are just going to try not make you giggle the whole episode because that's not what we're here for. But there's going to be some giggling, but we are just so glad that you're here. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you both so much for having me. I am absolutely thrilled to be here. The fangirling situation is mutual. I am a big fan of the podcast. I am a huge fan of Postpartum Support International. I love all of the things that they do. I feel so fortunate to be able to be a part of the work that they do. And I'm so excited for this episode because I think the things that we are going to talk about are things that we are ready to talk about in this field and that moms and parents are ready to talk about. I remember when I was preparing for my presentation on maternal rage over the summer, getting ready for the PSI conference. And I honestly remember thinking to myself, I wonder if anybody's going to attend my session, because it was a breakout session, right? So like,
spoiler alert.
Right.
They lock the doors.
Attendees could pick what sessions they wanted to attend. And I was like, I hope some people show up. And then, I had some therapist friends there and I was like, well, they'll be there. So that'll be nice. And then I'm standing on the stage as the room is filling up. And it was just waves is the only way I could describe it. It was just like massive waves of people coming into the room. And then I had the thought, which was, oh, I guess we're ready to talk about mom rage. I guess we're there. And then I was like, oh, I better not mess this up because there's a lot of people going into this room.
And it's being recorded, no pressure,
that's
just
right.
like this.
Yeah, and then there were so many people in the room. We had to literally ask some people to leave, and like we were encouraging people to leave, and then we had to lock the doors. It was unreal. So that was, I mean, I was ready to talk about mom rage, and it turns out that other people were too. So I'm here for it, and I'm excited about it.
Yay.
It was the first recording I listened to. As staff, when they became available to us, I was like, you know what I'm going to listen to first. And then you filled out the thing to be on the pod, and I was like, ooh, this is, serendipitous. Love it.
Absolutely.
Nicole, can you give us a little bit of an intro to who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Nicole McNelis. I am a licensed professional counselor and a perinatal mental health specialist. I'm a speaker and writer on all things motherhood. I like to say that I'm a therapist mom and a mom therapist. I have two kids. They are 12 and 8, and I live in the Philadelphia area of Pennsylvania.
Oh, great. Not too far from Emily. Yeah.
Not too far. We're going to have to hang out.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. We'll make it happen.
It's like, where should we meet up? The Liberty Bell? I don't know. Can we reenact the, oh my gosh, what was that Nicolas Cage movie?
Oh no, not like National Treasure. Oh no. That's like a last trip situation. We need to go somewhere fun. Oh no.
We have digressed.
We're not going to Pat's and Gino's for cheesesteaks, Emily. We're not doing it. No. We're going to like the real places.
It's a tourist trap. It is.
I've never had a Philly cheesesteak.
You order one with cheese. One with cheese.
Is that where they say like without?
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry. Okay. We should move on to the next question, but more on this later.
Yes. Okay. So can you tell us what role, if any, spoiler, I know the answer because I've already listened to your talk, what role perinatal mental health disorders have played in your personal life?
They have played a huge role in my personal life. So after I had, nearly immediately after I had my first, who is now 12 years old, unbelievably. So this was just about 12 years ago. He did not sleep. I don't know any other, there's no clinical terms for it. He didn't sleep. And it took us some time to figure out that he had a really severe reflux that led to colic. And this poor little guy, his reflux was so severe that he would only sleep in 20-minute increments, contact sleeping, and he had to be elevated. His head had to be elevated because the reflux was so bad. So I was painfully sleep deprived. I was, transitioning to this role of mother that I'd never had before, which is already like this monumental transition. And I was getting essentially zero sleep with another human attached to me.
Yeah.
I knew that something wasn't right, both with him, right? Because it was clear that I knew that not all babies slept well, but this seemed like pretty extreme. And I knew that something was really off with me. And I remember taking him to the pediatrician. And at that point, you're taking newborns to the pediatricians pretty often, but I was taking him even more often because I was going in there saying like, he's not sleeping. The spit up didn't seem normal. Like all of it seemed, I knew something was not quite right. And I remember at one point, it was probably about 3 or 4 weeks in, and I'm bringing him into the pediatrician every week. And his pediatrician at the time, who was no longer his pediatrician.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Foreshadowing.
Get ready. Oh, and I was crying in the appointment because I was so painfully sleep deprived. And I had postpartum depression at the time, but didn't know it. And says to me with an eye roll, "Do you think that you are the only mom who's ever come in here and cried?" And I was like, so I stopped crying because I was so ashamed. And she is a mom of 3 and a pediatrician. And so I'm thinking,
I am
wow,
shocked.
I'm really bad at this, right? Like here is this like accomplished doctor and mother of multiple children, and I'm in here crying, right?
Like, I can't handle one.
Yes. Like, I can't handle one, and he doesn't even do much. Right? Like, he's just like a newborn. He's like a baby blob, right? And I can't even handle that. And that was what I felt in the moment. And then I came home and I was like, no, it's not me. It's her. Right? Like,
dang.
It's not me, it's you. It's time to break up.
yes. And so I called the office back and I knew that we needed another appointment because I knew that something was probably medically not okay with my son. And I asked to see another pediatrician in the practice. I go in for that appointment literally like a few days later, explain everything that's been going on with my son. And that doctor says to me, it sounds like your son has textbook reflux. Here are the options for treatment. And also, it seems like you might not be doing too well. Here are some resources for you. And literally handed me they had a list. They had a printed list of resources at this pediatrician's office.
2 doctors, same office.
Same office.
Oh, man.
And the list is pre-printed. He didn't even have to go get it. He came into the meeting. He came into the appointment with the list, right? And he walked me through the treatment options for my son, encouraged me to engage in some treatment options and some assistance for myself. And one of the things I asked him was, so we did decide on a medication treatment for my son. And I remember asking him, how will I know, when the medicine is kicked in, or how will I know if it's working? And he says, it usually takes a few days, but he'll start sleeping. You'll still have the spit up stuff, but you'll know from sleeping. Let me tell you. So he said it was going to take a few days. I immediately went to the pharmacy, filled that prescription, gave that little guy his first dose of medication. He slept for 2 hours. He took a 2-hour nap. And then you know what I did during that 2-hour nap? I just looked at him the whole time. I didn't rest because I couldn't believe.
Right. You were like, something's wrong. That's too fast.
I was like, why is he doing this?
What have I done?
What have I done? Yeah. He took a 2-hour nap on his own, in the playpen thing. And I was like, I don't even understand how this is possible. And then he continued to do that. And I was like, it's the medication. He was in so much pain from the reflux that he could not rest. And he was trying to tell us that. And so that to me was such affirmation and confirmation to trust myself as a mother. And then him starting to sleep a little better then gave me the opportunity to get some assistance for myself, because he still wasn't a great sleeper, but he was a better sleeper. But we still had issues with feeding. We still had just a big mess every day with all of the spit up. It was still a lot. So that was my first experience with perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. And then during the pandemic, which is hard to believe that started up, 4 years ago, that we're dealing with that in 2020, I started noticing. So at that time, I was a mother of 2. My partner typically works out of the home, doesn't have a job where he can work from home typically. I had a hybrid practice, so I was seeing clients both from home and in the office. Oh, and both my kids were in school. So I had like made it to the promised land where like both of your kids were in school.
Oh, man, you had arrived.
Yes.
When the youngest like heads off to kindergarten and you're like, well then, and now for something different.
Yes. It's such an amazing thing. Yeah.
The hills are alive.
My oldest was in first grade. My youngest was in preschool. And it was like, oh, like we've made it to this, that's like really lovely sweet spot of parenting. And then the pandemic hit and everybody was home all the time. I had a first grader trying to do virtual school. I had a preschooler whose preschool was closed. I had a partner who typically doesn't work from home that was like, I don't even know how to work from home because this is not something that we do. I couldn't go to the office to see my clients anymore. It was just this intense experience. And then also it was terrifying, right? I know that you'll both understand this, right? As parents, one of the things that we frequently have an expectation that we'll be able to do is to protect our kids and keep them safe, right?
Right.
Right. And although we know that's not completely in our control, like we like to take the parts of it that are in our control and do that, right? And keep our kids as safe as we possibly can. And that just felt like it all went out the window. And that was absolutely terrifying. And then all of those feelings. So my clients frequently describe it like this. It feels like you're drowning and exploding at the same time. That was how I felt.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how is that even possible? But it is. They're not contradictory. You're literally drowning and exploding at the same time. So I felt that. And then I started to recognize this rage that was coming up for me that I had not experienced in that way before. And that was honestly just specifically tied to my role as a mother at that time. Like, I was just so overstimulated and overwhelmed and so scared that I had a really short fuse. And then that was scary. And it was just like this horrible snowball effect. So that was kind of my most recent experience with perinatal anxiety and mood disorders.
Yeah.
I like to keep it very intense.
Oh, man. I know Emily and I have both experienced rage, and I was way too afraid to tell anybody about it or talk about it. And I wasn't hearing anybody talk about it at the time because, I thought this was my job. And it's just, there's a lot going on for us, right? Like for you, it was an extreme overstimulation, everything being upended, expectations being way off. For me, postpartum, it was like lack of sleep and not knowing exactly what I was doing,
Yeah, the overwhelm and the juggling of multiple things is just...
Right. And then there's such shame and guilt associated with that, right? It's like, this is not how I've been told mothers act, right? This is not the expectation for mothers, right? And so then I need to feel badly about this emotional experience that I'm having. And so then we hide it and we don't do anything about it, because how can we do anything about it if we can't even share it, if we can't come to terms with what we're experiencing? And honestly, it reminds me of that early experience with that pediatrician, where it kind of stopped me in my tracks, where I was like, oh, she's clearly telling me that I'm doing this wrong. And so I need to figure this out. And also, this is not a place for me to share that experience, right? Like, this is clearly not a place for a mom to come in and cry during a medical appointment, right? And, I learned that real quick in that appointment, and what a terrible lesson, right? And so I think that that's frequently, that early experience is frequently reflected for so many of us as moms in many different experiences, including around the experience of mom rage, where it's like, you're not supposed to do that.
But it happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, go ahead, Emily. You're doing this with your fingers. All of our listeners who are not watching the video, Emily just put her fingers together, like in the shape of a diamond, and started tapping them. Like, I think she's got a thought.
I will never play poker with you because you know all my tells. She's about to say something.
Well, if you had a great poker hand and you suddenly started going with your fingers, maybe you shouldn't be playing poker. But anyway, Emily.
Hey.
What were you thinking of?
Okay. In your exploration of this experience of rage, right? So first you had the experience of rage, and then you were like, I want to learn more. And then I want to hear about the route that gets you to presenting at the conference. But I have a question about the rage. How many people who experience, I don't even want to say postpartum rage. I just want to say rage related to parenting, like rage in motherhood, whatever your identification is in that moment. How many people describe it as failure? Is it like 100%?
It's 100%. I think that might be the valid answer. So first of all, this is also not a surprise. In looking at the academic research on the topic of maternal rage and postpartum rage, there's not a ton of research, right? Which is like big surprise, because it is a healthcare issue related to a mental health issue related to motherhood specifically. So there's a big gap there. But thankfully, there is a handful of very recent research that's really, really well done. And there's two studies in particular that I'm thinking of that I used quite a bit in my presentation as like the basis of my presentation. And in those two studies, right, they really wanted to look at this experience of maternal rage from the mom's perspective. And the patterns that the researchers saw, one of the things that really rose to the top was this idea of shame and guilt. I am doing this wrong. one of the things that they talk about in particular in one of the studies is this idea of violated expectations. Most of us go into parenting thinking, I'm going to at least do okay at this, right? Right? Like I've got this, right? Like,
not only that, a lot of us think, oh, this is going to be great.
Yes.
We know what we're doing.
Yes.
I've nannied before.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, like overconfident. No clue what you're doing. I know how to build a house. Mm-hmm.
Right.
I've used a hammer.
I've seen Bob Vila. Anyway, sorry.
Yes, and I'm going to share this, and I'm going to share this with an apology. I was a school counselor before I started doing outpatient work, before I had kids. And when I was a school counselor, I was like, this is not that hard. These kids are so well behaved with me. They tell me all these things. I love working with them. That was because I was not at home with those children.
Those little monsters.
You were not saying, excuse me, when was the last time you showered, sir?
Correct.
Don't tell me 2 or 3 days ago. It's been longer. I can tell.
Yep.
Also, 2 or 3 days is still a wrong answer.
I know. Yeah.
So, yes. So violated expectations is this idea, right? That we go into parenting with these expectations, but also there's all of these societal expectations, right? So there's the expectations we have of ourselves, and then there's these external expectations, right? And for mothers, those expectations, at least in our culture, right, and in our country, in America, are pretty clear, right, what those expectations are. And the expectations are, that mothers will be blissful and calm and happy and gentle all of the time, right? And at least that's like the current trend, right? And then when you don't meet those expectations, the idea is that you have done something terribly, terribly wrong, right? And what happens is we internalize those expectations. And so then the violated expectations are this idea that the expectations, we have violated external expectations and we violated internal expectations, right? So yes, then what's the conclusion? I have failed, right? Not that the system has failed me, not that there's something wrong with these expectations. It's I have not met these expectations, which are essentially not meetable, right? That's like not a thing. Or let's be honest, right? A lot of times when dads mess up, it's funny.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I think we need to be really honest about that. So one of the things, like at the very beginning of my presentation this summer, I talk about how in the literature, what we're talking about is referred to as maternal rage. And I am using that term to refer to anyone who identifies as a mother in a motherhood role, right? But it is also important to talk about the different expectations for someone who identifies as a mother and someone who identifies as a father. Those expectations are really different, right? There's a reason that we're not talking about paternal rage, right? There's a reason that we are talking about maternal rage as a phenomenon. And so I think that that's an important distinction to make. So I use it as an inclusive term, and we still have to look at the expectations piece of it because it actually plays in really heavily to that experience of maternal rage.
Yes.
I don't know if you could see the soapbox that I'm standing on, but there is one.
It's lovely, actually. I really like that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like what you've done there. Yeah, great soapbox.
Okay, now that we've nerded out a little bit about the journey from the experiences of rage, and let's face it, you had reasonable expectations of what parenting would look like. And then suddenly pandemic, right? I just would like to preface that. You weren't like, I'm going to be perfect and I'm going to skip through a field of flowers and my children will only eat vegetables. Like you had reasonable expectations and they just weren't met. None of ours were met. How did you go from that to I'm doing a presentation on it? Because were you already providing care to people in the perinatal period at that time? Like, talk us through all that.
Yeah. So, that is quite a journey. So, as I mentioned, I was a school counselor before I had children. And then with my first, so I was planning to take my big 12 weeks of unpaid leave. I worked at a private school, so there was no access to, and a really lovely private school. And I adore them and I still keep in touch with them. So it's not their fault. That's just how in Pennsylvania, there's 12 weeks unpaid leave and that's all we get.
Yeah.
Unless your employer offers something more. And they did not have the ability to do that. So I was going to take my big 12 weeks of unpaid leave, and then I was going to return to my job as a school counselor. And because of the postpartum experience that I had, and the school it was quite a commute. It was 45 minutes in each direction.
Oh,
Yeah.
I honestly didn't, with the amount of sleep that I was getting and the way that I was feeling, it literally wasn't safe for me to drive, for me to drive 5 minutes, let alone to drive 45 minutes to work every day, back up to an hour and a half round trip commute. It just wasn't safe. And I wasn't physically up to it. I wasn't emotionally up to it. I was in such a state that I could not return to work. And so I had to make the very difficult decision of taking what I call an extended maternity leave. So I ended up taking a full year of unpaid leave, which is super fun. And yeah.
That's sarcasm, listeners.
Yes. So, and I also recognized, even though it was a challenge for our family, just the fact that we were able to do that is still in many ways a privilege, right? So it's this weird thing where it was like, it was hard for us, but it was still a privilege because many people don't even have that option. So at least I had that option, even though it wasn't ideal and it wasn't the option that I wanted to take. And at the end of that year, I was so ready to get back to paid work. My son was in such a better place medically, and he still is a very social little guy. So like he was ready for something more than like hanging out with me all day long and going to the Y. That was our big thing that we did. And so, and I had my license. And so at that point, I decided to move into outpatient care. So I went from the school setting. I went and I worked for a really large group practice in the area that was a 3-minute commute from my house, which was like brilliant. Wow. So I went from an hour and a half round trip to 6 minutes door to door, which was pretty freaking amazing.
Yeah. It's hard to beat that.
And it was a really great experience. I had a wonderful supervisor. The group that I worked with was really lovely. And so that was my first experience in outpatient care. And then once I had my second, I really started to think about, who do I serve? Because when I was working for the big group practice, I was a generalist. I saw everybody. I saw couples, I saw kids, I saw adolescents, I saw adults individually. That was just the type of practice that it was. I saw everyone. And I learned through that experience that who I really work with best and who I felt like I served best, not surprisingly, was moms. And I really wanted to then focus on perinatal mental health. So after having my second, I took the PSI trainings, I got my certification, I did all of that. And then my second, once he was a couple years old, I started putting things in motion for my private practice. And that's where I am now. My private practice is my private practice just turned 5 in September, which was pretty wild.
Happy birthday. Happy belated birthday, private practice.
Thank you. So that's how I ended up in private practice, specializing in perinatal mental health. And then I should backtrack a little bit. Before I was even a school counselor, I actually was in sales and marketing. So
Interesting.
Yep. So I graduated with my undergraduate degree was in industrial organizational psychology, mostly because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And that was just kind of interesting. And then I had friends that were in sales and marketing, and I was like, that looks like fun. And they give you a company car. So I was like, I like that. And so I did.
Sign me up.
And that was right out of college. I was like, oh, that sounds good. And so I did that for a few years. And then I was like, oh, this is not a good fit for me. And then that's how I ended up in graduate school and that whole piece. So the way that connects to the PSI presentation is being in sales and marketing for 6 years. You get desensitized to people telling you no. That's part of the job. Part of your training in sales is that you have to close the deal, right? You have to ask people to sign the contract or buy the product or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of got desensitized to that. And I had managers that would say, the worst thing that a customer can say is no. And then you move on, right? And you don't take it personally, because if you take it personally, you'll be miserable, right? And so the way I came to the PSI presentation, well, first of all, maternal rage was coming up a lot in my sessions with clients. I had personally experienced it. I was seeing it reflected quite a bit in social media. And so the conversation around maternal rage was changing. And so I remember when, there's a proposal period that comes out before the conference. And so the conference is in July and the proposals are due in like January.
Beginning of January. Mark your calendars, folks.
Yes. And I think the call for proposals comes out in like November, December. And
Yes.
I remember, I got the email. I'm on all the PSI email lists and I got the proposal and I was like, you know what? So this is actually what I said to myself. And I think I've had a number of colleagues ask me about this particular experience. And so I saw the call for proposals and I remember thinking to myself, I would like to present at PSI at some point in my career. Not now, because I'm not ready.
You know what? Are we ever ready fully for any? I mean, do we ever feel like, you know what?
Right. That's the lesson. That was what I actually said to myself. I'm not ready. This will be my practice round. So I'm going to submit this proposal.
Oh, right. Nailed it.
Yep. I'm going to go through the motions fully expecting that they're going to say no. Because why would they say yes to me? Like, they don't know who I am, right? I'm just going to try this out. And then when they say no, maybe I'll even ask them for feedback. And so next time when I'm ready, then I'll have a better proposal and maybe they'll accept it.
That's a really great growth mindset, by the way.
And so that was how I got over the fear of submitting the proposal. Because I was like, they're going to say no. So I lowered the stakes. I was like, it doesn't matter because they're going to say no. I remember the moment where the email came through that my proposal was accepted. So it was in February. It was typical chaotic after school. My kids are doing homework. I'm trying to get dinner on the table. And I hear the thing on my phone beep Ding. That I got an email. Yep. And I go and look at it. And I saw that it was for the conference. So my expectation was going to be like, thank you, but sorry. But I saw that it said congratulate. The first word was congratulations. And I was like,
what?
The sound that I made scared my children. The squeal, that's the only way that like came out of me. They were like, Mom, are you okay? Is everybody, because they saw me looking at my phone and then this noise came out of me. So they thought I got some like terrible news. And here's the other piece. PSI just asked for a proposal. They don't ask for your full presentation. The presentation did not exist.
Yeah, I know. Same.
It did not exist. So then I was like, oh, I better start working on
I have homework.
Because the only thing that exists is the outline that they asked me for. Like, what do I do now? I didn't think they were going to say yes. So that is, that is my very wild ride.
Okay. First of all, can we normalize that is how it happens for so many people?
Oh, good.
Number one. And number two, I've been in with the people who review. I have never done the reviewing, but I've been in conversations with them about reviewing those things. It is always like, what's the hottest topic right now? So the fact that you were like, this seems relevant right now. People are ready to talk about it. It's like, is it a hot topic? Is what you want to say on it flushed out enough that they know that you can put together a presentation? Because most of us do not already have that sitting and laying in wait. Yes, like that is the process. Very normal. And also, yay. Yay for you.
It was wild.
Oh my gosh.
So good.
Yes. So that is how I arrived on that stage.
In a mosh pit of people, basically.
It was on. I mean, can we just talk about for a minute? So one of the things that I purposely added into my presentation was audience participation, because I am probably the least patient therapist that you will ever meet. Like, patience is not a virtue that I like. So like, I want my clients to get results. Like, it is just, that is how I live my life. And so when I was putting together the presentation, I was like, I really want the audience to be engaged. So there's many points in the presentation where I specifically ask for audience participation, right? And so I had could we shout out to Cody? I had the loveliest room host.
Also a podcast.
Yeah. Oh, she's the best. So for people who weren't there, a room host is so you have the presenter and then you have somebody who is helping you with audience participation, with like the audio visual stuff, with locking the doors when too many people come into the room.
Cody didn't know what she was signing up for.
Dude. Yeah.
It was wild. So she was doing essentially the audience participation piece. So like I had my mic and then she had another mic that we would turn on and she would go out into the audience and let and encourage audience participation. At one point when we were asking for audience participation, the attendees just stopped waiting for the mic and started standing on chairs and just screaming things out. And you can actually hear it during the official recording. So people were so hyped and so into the topic that they were like, I'm not waiting for that mic to get passed to me. I'm standing on my chair and I'm screaming things out. So that was the mood in the room was just electric. Like it was, in addition to being a presentation, it was also like a group therapy session.
Yes.
When you were standing up there, did you have moments where you're like, oh my goodness, we're just real engaged? Like, did you have kind of like an out of body experience or were you able to kind of stay in it or in the moment?
No, not at all.
You just what's happening? Okay.
I broke, and you can hear it in the recording. I broke multiple times during the presentation because I was laughing so hard that I was crying. Because we were just having the best time. It was a release, right? It was this huge release.
That was palpable on the recording.
And one of the things that we talk about, right, as an intervention for maternal rage, right, that comes up in the research and that we felt in that room was just talking about it, just getting it out there, right? And recognizing there are hundreds of people in this room and they all feel the same way and they all want to talk about this. What a relief when I tell my clients that there is a name. So sometimes labels are bad, sometimes they're good. When I tell my clients there is a name for this thing that you are experiencing and there are interventions and there is support and this isn't your fault. The relief is just, you can feel it. And so you could feel the relief in that room and the laughter in that room was part of that release. I tell people all the time, because when people think of therapy, I think they think of like the sad parts of therapy and the traumatic parts of therapy, which absolutely those exist. But I don't think people realize the joy that there is in the work that I get to do and how hard we laugh sometimes in the therapy room and how hard we were laughing during a presentation on maternal rage, not because the topic is funny, but because it was such a release and it was such a relief to know that there is a name and there's interventions and like we are all experiencing this at the same time. And it was like such a moving experience. And one of the ways that I kind of, because this was the other thing I've been asked, like, oh, how many times have you presented on this? I was like 0. This was my first time ever presenting on this topic. This was my first time ever presenting in front of such a large audience. I'd done like small continuing education presentations before, nothing like this. And so I've had colleagues ask me like, well, then how did you get to the place where you could even do that? And I was like, well, I'm glad that it didn't look like I was having a heart attack because I felt like I was. My heart rate was up to 160 beats a minute at certain points.
Your Fitbit was like, are you okay?
My Fitbit thought I ran a marathon during that hour-long presentation. So First of all, sometimes you just have to do things scared. But I wasn't necessarily scared. I was mostly excited.
Yeah.
The way that I kind of pumped myself up for the actual presentation is, so it just so happened that this year during the conference was, it was Olympic time, like the Olympics were going on.
Yes.
It's no secret, I'm in my 40s. And so when I was in, like, I guess high school, it was the 1996 Olympics, and there was a really, really well-known, the women's gymnastics teams from the United States. Like,
oh yeah,
they were huge that year. So that was like Shannon Miller and that whole team, right? And so those gymnasts are now in their 40s, and many of them are moms. And I read this really beautiful article where Shannon Miller specifically talked about how that was her last Olympics, and she knew it was her last Olympics, and she was going into her last event. And she thought to herself, I cannot prepare for this moment anymore. I can't. I've done everything I possibly could to prepare for this moment. And now I'm just going to have fun. So when I was on that stage and people were pouring into, so I read that like literally a day or two before I left for the conference. And so I'm standing on that stage and people are pouring into the room. And I have to give a shout out to my Philly crew of therapists. They parked themselves right. They got there early.
Philly crew in the house.
My Philly crew, they parked themselves right in the middle of the room, right in front of the stage so that I could see them. If I needed them, they were there for me. I kept looking at them, like my eyes getting real big, looking around the room. Like, do you believe it? I started taking pictures of the audience pouring into the room. And I was getting so amped. And then I remembered that article that I read where Shannon Miller talked about, I can't prepare anymore for this moment now. I just need to have fun. And that's kind of what I said to myself. I was like,
wow.
So from February until July, I actually started putting the presentation together and preparing for it, going over it. My partner has heard that presentation so many times. I did it in front of a colleague. I could not have been, there was nothing else that I could have done to prepare. I just had to have fun. And clearly people were ready. And so I was like, now I just need to show up and really be present in this moment and see what happens. And things happened during that presentation. So that is the very long answer to your question, Emily, of how I got to the presentation.
I love it. I love it. There's so many important takeaways in what you just said.
I think people probably will like to hear like a little behind the scenes of presenting at the PSI conference because, there's a lot of people that are interested. There's a lot of interest in doing that. So
yes. And your episode is going to air basically like right before that's open again. So it'll be really well timed for people who are listening and they're like on the fence. It's like, what's the worst that happens? Like, you get to try again next year? It's fine. Do it.
Or you're on a stage in July.
Surprise. You're in New Orleans in July, crowd surfing. Basically.
No, that's not what happens.
No, that's what Cody did in order to get the audience participation.
Yeah.
That is what she did.
Yeah.
Like she just fell backwards and held the microphone.
Trust fall. No. It's really cool though that we're talking about this. This was probably about a year ago or so. I mean, about right?
Yes.
that the email went out, just saying, hey, call for proposals, right?
Yep.
1 year later, here we are in the podcast studio.
Yep.
Picking your brain. I was curious when did PSI come onto your radar? You were a school counselor. When you became a parent, did you know about PSI at all? Or was it kind of like later that you learned about PSI when you were like, I think I want to really be supporting folks, like moms specifically? Tell us more.
That's such a great question. So I wish I had known about PSI after I had my first. So one of the things I'm so thankful for, and one of the reasons that I'm such a big fan of PSI is because in 12 years, which is honestly not that long of a time.
It's a blip.
Yes. The landscape in terms of perinatal mental health and the support that exists, it's astronomical, the change and the shift that has occurred. And so after having my first, I struggled to find support. And I live in a major metropolitan area, 1 hour outside of a major East Coast city. And right. I struggled to find a therapist who specialized in postpartum depression, right? And that is wild to me because now my understanding is that there are over 5,000 therapists that have the perinatal mental health certification. That is unbelievable to me. And I'm so, so thankful for that. So no, I did not know about PSI after I had my first. So I was very lucky. So I struggled to find a therapist who specialized, but it just so happened that the hospital where I gave birth and the OB office that delivered my son, they had a postpartum adjustment support group that they ran for, which was
cool.
so rare at the time.
Yeah.
They ran that group for 13 years. And it was run by the same nurse practitioner and same hospital social worker for 13 years. So once a month for 13 years. they ran this support group. I'm still in touch with both of them today. They're the best.
Oh, wow. So, what lifesavers to have that peer support available. Oh.
Yes, it was amazing. The two women who facilitated that group are amazing. And I feel so lucky to have found them. And then thankfully, so my kids are 4 years apart. When I was pregnant with my second, I am as type A gets. And I was like, I learned from my experience last time. I don't want to have that experience again where I'm floundering postpartum and trying to find support. I want the support lined up. Like I literally want a color-coded binder.
I want a flow chart. Am I feeling this?
That's exactly right. Yes, that is that was exactly my plan. And so I reached out to a colleague who specialized, and she was like, oh, you just call the PSI warm line and they help you find a therapist. And I was like, the what? What?
Come again?
What is this that you speak of? There is a phone number that I can call, and somebody who is trained is going to help me find a therapist who specializes in this. Like, is this even real? And it was.
Oh, it's real.
And I spoke to the loveliest support person for Southeastern Pennsylvania, who I'm also still in touch with today because she is a lovely human and therapist. And she helped me to find someone, and I'm so thankful for that experience with my, and then of course with my second, I had a very different experience and didn't need as much support, but I was still so grateful to happen. And I was also so grateful to that introduction to PSI and all of the work that they did, because once after I had my second and I was like, oh, I think I want to do this work, I was already familiar with a lot of the great work. So that was my introduction to PSI, and I'm still so grateful for it and for all of the work that they do, because I think it's really unbelievable. I mean, it went from being difficult to find a therapist who specialized to now there is just the most wonderful abundance of therapists. Like now you can be picky. Now you can be like, I want to use insurance. I'm okay with private pay. I want online therapy. I want to go in person. Then it was just like, I just need somebody. Get me to somebody who knows this specialty.
Who isn't going to tell me to calm down.
Oh my God, please stop telling moms to calm down. Please.
Yeah.
The shift has been just amazing to witness that shift in the field. And I keep coming back to the point that I'm so grateful for it. And honestly, I'm so grateful to be part of it. And I'm so like, I wear my certification from PSI, like if they made jackets with like I would wear it. Like maybe that needs to be like the next merch situation. I would wear it.
Oh no.
Or like a sash.
I've got ideas.
Give it to me.
Oh, PMHC type, like bridesmaid or turning 40, but PMHC. Okay.
That's right.
Or you're just like walking down the street and you like pull your jacket open and it's like silk lined with the PMHC logo inside.
I love it. Yep.
Or you're a pink lady. It's Greece.
There's clearly potential here.
Let's flesh this out. We're going to have you put on your marketing hat later and we're going to flesh this out.
Yeah. You're not getting rid of us this easy, Nicole. We have ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're going to have to hang out and discuss over one with cheese, you know? Yeah.
Just not at the Liberty Bell.
Not at the Liberty Bell.
Okay. We're having way too much fun. I was wondering, do both of you feel like you're ready to hop into the lightning round real quick?
Oh, yeah.
I'm ready.
Great. Okay, Nicole. Dun, dun, dun. First question. Besides this podcast, what is your second favorite podcast, if you would like to suggest anything to our lovely listeners?
Sure. I do have a second favorite podcast.
Interesting.
Yes, that is a thing for me. I am, as I've mentioned, and as we can tell from this interview, I'm generally a pretty intense person. The work that I do with clients it's really intense work, right? And I definitely bring my whole self to it. And so when I'm listening to a podcast that is not this podcast, I need something frequently that's a little bit lighter, kind of ridiculous. I love to laugh. For me, laughter is like medicine.
Oh, yeah.
There is this podcast called How Did This Get Made?
Oh.
Sounds like an engineering podcast, but it is not. It is a podcast about the most ridiculous movies that ever got made. And so most of the movies that they talk about on this podcast, I have not only never seen, but also never heard of, but it's so funny. And they fully bring you into the story and how ridiculous these particular movies are.
Like Snakes on a Plane.
Yes.
Okay,
exactly the type of movies that they review on this podcast. Like one of my favorite episodes is on Teen Witch.
Oh,
because that was from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it is just an absurd movie. And they take you through the movie from beginning to end in all of its absurdity. It's 3 actors, and they're actors from shows that I love, like Parks and Rec and A Good Place.
Oh.
And so they're character actors. Yeah, I'm forgetting their names right now, but they're hysterical. And it is so light and so funny and such an escape for me. And I just love it for that. So I'll just be like doing the dishes, laughing hysterically. My kids have no idea what I am laughing at.
What's so funny? And you're like, it's not for you.
Yes, it is not for them. It is not a kid-friendly pod, by the way. It's not a kid-friendly podcast, but it is adult-friendly and it is hysterical, and I love it.
can I just throw something in there? I know this is not like a clinical intervention, but since we've been talking about mom rage and having big feelings and parenting, and listening to a funny podcast for me really does help me sort of like come back to center, much like exercise or like, I don't know, listening to music or something. Like if I can laugh and kind of disconnect from somebody that's a teenager being real mad at me for basically breathing or, like just hypothetical example there.
No, now I have to point out, right? So one of the things that leads to maternal rage is compromised need. So like a compromise, we talked about sleep, but a compromised need could also be overstimulation. So if you're overstimulated, then what helps is decompression. In my mind, what better decompression is there than just laughing so hysterically at the most ridiculous, like things that are like low stakes, like really silly movies, right? And
yes.
So,
Right.
yes, that is absolutely therapeutic in the best way.
Yeah. Thanks for like getting nerdy real quick about that.
Yeah.
Speaking of character actors, see how I'm tying it in? Are you currently binge watching or reading, maybe, anything that we need to put into our queue?
Okay, so now I'm going to go in a completely different direction. Have either of you seen The Wild Robot?
No.
Okay, so then I must prepare you.
Is this the one that makes people cry?
Not just cry, but like
Oh.
full on sobbing. So my kids have both read The Wild Robot. So it's a series of, there's 3 books. It's a series. And my kids are not big movie kids. They like shows, but they don't necessarily love movies. So when the trailer came out and they had read the books and they saw the trailer, they immediately asked to go see the movie. And I was like, they never asked to go to the movie. Yes, we are absolutely going to the movies. So this sounds amazing. And then I watched the trailer and I was like, this seems like kind of an emotional. And then so I asked them, like, is this? And they were like, yeah, it's emotional, but it's a really good story. We think you're going to like it. And then I like to be, this is so funny because even though I'm type A, I still like surprises, especially in art. So like in books, in music, in movies, I don't want to know what I'm getting into. For example, I had the opportunity to see Wicked on Broadway this summer. That show has been out for 20 years. I did not know, other than it's about the 2 witches in Oz, I didn't know anything else about the story.
Oh.
Same.
And on purpose, I didn't want to know. And so I went into The Wild Robot the same way. So I specifically asked my kids to not tell me kind of the general theme of the story because I wanted to be, because we hardly ever go to the movies, I wanted the experience of being surprised and being very present. Thankfully, they told me that I, at a minimum, should bring some tissues.
At a minimum?
At a minimum,
Okay.
They were like, you might want to bring some tissues. And I was like, okay. Especially the older one was like, you need to really bring some tissues. And I was like, okay. And so we're in the movie theater. And I mean, the movie is like at least an hour and a half long. 20 minutes in, it's not like the gentle, like tears rolling down. No, we're talking like full on sobbing.
Like heaving chest. Oh, God.
So I'm not going to ruin it for you, but one of the major themes of the movie is about maternal love and the power of maternal love. And I was like, you guys could have told me that. That still wouldn't have ruined the story for me. I didn't know that was serious. I didn't know. Really, I sobbed most of the movie. And talk about like a catharsis. Like it's just so well done and so beautiful. And my 8-year-old was like patting me on the back because he heard me crying during they were like worried about me because I was crying so hard in the movie. But I also think that was good for them to see, like, it's okay to be emotional. And then to make me feel better, they were like, oh, we got a little choked up. We got a little teary. And then I turned to them and I was like, why didn't you tell me that this was going to be like this? And they just looked at me and they were like, because you told us not to. And I was like, why is this the time that you listen? Why was this was the moment that you picked to do the thing that I asked you to do?
Those 3,000 times I asked you to put your shoes on, you could not have been bothered at all. But this time...
they listened. They did not tell me anything. And they were very proud of that. And I sobbed.
So anyway, everybody should go watch it.
It's so good. It's so good, but bring tissues.
Okay. I've seen the preview and I was intrigued. So now I'm like, it's nice to have a good like therapeutic cry every once in a while.
Yes. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I'm going to wait till I can watch it at home under a weighted blanket.
Yes. Also a good option. Yeah.
Yes. Nicole, what is your best parenting hack?
So for me, it's the idea of embracing good enough parenting, because parenting is hard. And, we've talked about expectations and just how out of control expectations are, especially for mothers. And there's expectations for everything: how you feed your kids, how you engage with them and their education, how you dress, everything. There's expectations for everything in terms of how we care for our children. So I talk to clients a lot about finding what is a good fit for you and your family, rather than living up to some arbitrary expectations that are honestly nonsense and don't make a whole lot of sense anyway. And so for me, the idea of good enough parenting is like bomb, right? It's just this, I'm getting all these messages about what this type of parenting needs to be like. And it's just like, no, this is just good. Like a weekday dinner that I could just warm up really quickly is good enough, right? Going to soccer with the stuff packed, like we get there a minute before it starts, good enough, right? Like you're
there in time.
Good enough parenting is the best kind of parent. It just has to be good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. And as somebody who fully owns up to being a recovering perfectionist, it has really been a wonderful, wonderful shift for me.
I had a sticky note sitting on my computer screen for quite a while with a quote from my therapist who said, Danny, start with good enough. And I had to read that every day because, oh man, it's hard to get started if you don't think you're doing good enough. But it's okay. Just start with good enough.
Yep.
Emily, I think I almost took the next question from you.
What, parenting hack?
Mm-hmm. Did you ask it?
No, you asked that.
Yeah, now it's your turn. It's very lightning-y. This round is so fast.
It's so fast.
We can't even keep up.
Buckle up, people.
Yeah.
Questions are flying.
We're about to get a speeding ticket.
This question is one that Danny and I discuss off pod all the time. What is one way that you will show yourself radical love? Because I think the question is strange and she loves it. And I'm like, radical! I don't understand.
I feel attacked.
I will give you my interpretation of it. I think it is a lovely question.
Thanks, Nicole.
This is what I think about. So, and this is honestly probably going to seem like an odd answer. So we are recording in October. I'm in Pennsylvania. And the thing that I am going to do is go swimming inside. There is a backstory to this. So I am somebody who considers myself fairly athletic. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school. I feel my best when I am in motion, but I am a terrible, this is like this. So I had to get over this because this was honestly embarrassing for me for a really long time. I am a really bad swimmer. So I can do what I call survival swimming. Like I won't sink.
Right.
But I can't do like any of like, I can't do any of the strokes
laps,
besides like a rudiment. Yeah. Like I can do, I guess what's like a rudimentary freestyle, but even that's being pretty generous. And so my kids are both now, thankfully, better swimmers than I am. And they have been asking me to go and take adult swim lessons because I'm such a bad swimmer.
You're not an expert yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Not bad. You're not an expert yet.
One of the reasons I didn't do it is because one, I didn't feel like I had the time because my life is very full and very busy, but mostly I was embarrassed. I was like, I'm in my 40s and I got to take, I don't know how to do the backstroke. Like, what? This is embarrassing. And so finally this fall, I found, because I was kind of like looking on the periphery, and I found a really lovely teacher who does private swim lessons at a private pool. It is indoors. The pool is heated. And I messaged her and I was like, do you do adult swim lessons? And she was like, I love working with adults. And I was like, I got somebody who's interested.
And it's me.
As someone who has taught swim lessons before, teaching adult swim lessons is so much better, right?
Oh, good. I thought you were going to say it's so bad.
They're so invested in the process where like the kids are thrust into this because the parents are like, I don't want you to drown at the pool this summer, or I want to be able to like read a book at the beach someday, right?
Yes.
Adults are like, I want to know some things.
And I'm not afraid. The thing is, I'm not afraid of the water. I actually like the water. I just couldn't move around very efficiently in it.
Yes. Yes.
And so I think that has made the lessons a lot more enjoyable because I actually like being in the pool and I am enjoying learning how to move my body efficiently in the water to like get from place to place in the pool. So that is a way that I feel like I'm showing myself love, is by like, I was really bad at this thing. I was really embarrassed about being bad at this thing. And so I am totally being vulnerable, and I am showing up with the understanding that I do not know how to do this. I found someone who is kind and compassionate, but also competent and really good at teaching me how to do this thing. And I did not think I was going to look forward to lessons. I actually look forward to it now. For me, setting that time aside is a big deal. Like that was an act of radical self-love and saying, I don't actually have the time to do this, but I'm going to make the time because this is so important to me. And so my goal is to like really be on the move in the water by the summer. So I'll keep you updated.
Yes, I want to be updated on this. How do you sleep on the days that you go?
Oh my goodness. So this teacher, like I mentioned, is so lovely. And after the first day, and like I said, I'm pretty athletic. Like I work out quite a bit. And so I was like, oh, this is like the athletic piece of it is not going to be hard, like the cardio piece of it. And this is what the instructor said to me. She said, oh, you're a land athlete. That doesn't always translate.
Yes, I am too.
I'd never heard that term. She called me a land athlete, and it was not a compliment.
You know what? That's just rude. Emily grew up as a swimmer, and I played soccer. I dabble still in running. But one of my main points to Emily about swimming was that I don't live there in that water, okay? I was not born there. If I'm tired, I can't just stop. Now, if I'm on a trail or something, I could just come to a screeching halt, lay on the ground if I need to, find a bench. You know what I mean? Like, yes. What if you're like open water swimming? I just don't get it. I'm a land creature. I'm a land athlete. Okay?
Right there with you.
I'm with you. High five. High five. Nicole, if anybody else is a land athlete, or maybe they're interested in connecting with you for reasons outside of exercising, maybe to talk about perinatal mental health, about rage, about they just have some questions for you, or they're
an Eagles fan. They want to talk about the Eagles like all the time.
Well, Nicole didn't say she's an Eagles fan.
I am not originally from this area. I've lived here for 20 years now, basically my entire adult life, but like the Eagles thing is still a little bit foreign to me. My kids are Eagles fans, so like I will indulge them, but I can't say I am fully there because it is a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Well, okay, maybe not to talk about Eagles stuff, but if anybody would like to get a hold of you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Sure. So I have a website for my practice. So that's NicoleMcNelis.com. And then I am also active on Instagram, and my handle on Instagram is Therapist Mom Collective.
We will put links to all the things in the show notes. We have 2 more questions, and I think maybe Emily should ask both of them. Well, you know what? Can I ask one of them and then you ask the last one?
Yeah.
Just to switch things up a little bit. We always ask because we want to make sure all of our guests are hydrated. Nicole, how do you take your water? Bubbles, no bubbles, flavor, ice? Tell us.
Here's my water. So I am a little extra with my water.
Oh.
So I'll take you through the whole thing. So we have a double-walled bottle because we cannot have sweaty water bottles.
Oh,
right?
Amen.
Right. We've got the reusable straw, but then in the water bottle, so we have some ice, but then we also, if you can see it, we have lemon, cucumber, and ginger.
Oh, snap.
It's really good. And because I am type A, like I don't have time every day to like be cutting up a lemon and ginger and cucumber. I cut them in batches and I freeze it.
That's so smart.
And then every day I just pull out my lemon, my ginger, and my cucumber and throw it in my water bottle.
You got ice cubes in your water.
Yes.
Not only is that smart, that's cost efficient.
So
too.
ice cubes that double as flavor,
Yes.
double walled,
Yep.
through a straw, no bubbles.
Correct.
Write that down, people.
You heard it here first.
It's the original recipe. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. What is one thing that today you wishes that you could hop in a little time machine, go back and say to pre-recovery you? What did you need to hear?
As a therapist, I absolutely love this question. I have to say that. But I also feel like this is your Oprah question. I feel like you guys know what you're doing with this question. I've listened to this podcast enough where I know that this is where it's a very emotional question, right? Especially for someone who does this work, but has also experienced it personally. So this is what I would say. I would tell her that I'm sorry for what she experienced. I would tell her that she will find support that will not only sustain her, but will inspire her. And when she is ready, and it's going to take some time, she will turn her pain into her purpose. And when she embraces her purpose, she will be relentless and driven and hopeful. And that someday she will find joy in spaces where she did not think any joy could exist. And that someday, while working to make sure that her clients feel seen and heard, they will laugh so hard together in the therapy room that she will fall out of her chair. That is a true story. That is a true story.
Oh.
And that one day she will be standing on a stage in front of hundreds of colleagues, and her heart will be racing, and there will come a moment in her presentation where she and the audience will laugh so hard that it will bring her to those laugh-crying tears. And that the baby who struggled with sleep will someday ask her not to cheer so loudly from the sidelines when he scores in soccer, because he is 12 now and she is embarrassing him. And in those moments of joy, she will think back to the moments where the goal was simply survival, and she will be so grateful to be right here, right now. That's what I would tell her.
Well, we're all crying. Nicole, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for saying all the things. And yeah, Nicole asked us to save that question for the last. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Oh, that's so wonderful.
Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for doing this work. I just feel so grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
We absolutely freaking adore you. Friend, Emily, can you take us out? I'm just going to be over here wiping some tears. Go ahead.
Cool. Okay, Nicole. First of all, thank you for thinking that they would say no when you wrote your presentation proposal. I literally wrote that down. I think that's It's such a wise way to approach things that are a maybe, and I like to not wait for perfect conditions to like put yourself out there. I love that. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for becoming, I don't know, a spokesperson for the rage community. Thank you for making all of us seen. That line in your presentation that I will give the edited version of, put on your shoes, because nothing quite captures what maternal rage feels like in the moment when you are trying, I'm going to cry, when you are trying to push through and be present and be okay, and you aren't quite like that line, put on your shoes. To the children out there, please put on your shoes.
Thanks again for having me. This was fun. Despite the crying at the end, which was very cathartic, this was super fun. Don't fast forward the podcast. Listen to the whole thing, because we laughed a lot and then we cried. But it was all good.
And then we cried until my nose started to run. That's awkward.
Thanks for tuning in to the I Am One podcast. Check out today's show notes, where we'll drop links to all the important things that we mentioned in this episode. Please consider sharing about I Am One on social media and following and rating our show wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. It only takes a minute of your time, and, well, that'll help our collective mission of bringing resources and local support to folks worldwide. From everyone here at PSI, thanks again for listening.